Welcome to Next to Nonprofits. My name is Katie Bauer, and today I am pleased to be joined by James Dismond, the CEO of Mirasol Health. James, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me. Super excited.
Yes, I am so excited to have a conversation with you today about rebranding a nonprofit and what goes into that. But before we jump into all the details, I would love to hear a little bit about yourself and Mirasol Health.
Yeah, so James Dismond, I'm a homegrown Kentucky boy at heart. I have been with Marisol Health for 5 years, started off in marketing and development, and now have the privilege and the honor every day of being the chief executive officer.
Excellent. So you actually have a marketing background, which is so relevant to the work that you have been doing. Yeah, could you let us know a little bit about Mirasol Health, and where you are and what you do and some of your program work?
Yeah, so Mirasol Health is a community-driven organization. Everything we do revolves around the community. We are serious illness management, end-of-life care, and soon we will also be behavioral health, focusing on the mental health gaps within our community. So everything we do involves the community, fills gaps, and provides the care that's needed.
Okay. And okay, so rebranding, you all went through a 2-year rebranding process. That is a huge undertaking.
It was enormous, to say the least.
So I'm wondering if you could provide our listeners with a little background about Mirasol Health. What was what was the brand or the organization prior to what all the work that you did?
So before Marisol Health was even in existence, because we created that name for us, we were hospice care of the Low Country, a very traditional Medicare certified hospice organization that provided end of life care. And as we were doing a brand analysis, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I'm sure, we started seeing clues that our services were not necessarily matching everything that we were doing in the community and what we needed to do in the future to really be stabilized and carry out our mission in the future.
So you saw a disconnect between the work you were actually doing and how your organization communicated. Is that correct?
Yes, that is directly on. And we started seeing these nuances where people would not say the word hospice. They would say we're providing supportive services while you're transitioning. And so I started diving into why this word was being skipped over. And I also noticed when I would be speaking in the community, I'd be like, I'm with hospice care of the Low Country, and I'd get the, oh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm so excited to chat with you about this. I think let's just take a moment and establish the concept of a brand. What is a brand? When people think rebranding, they're thinking, oh, let's just give a logo refresh. I think there's a little bit more to it. Would you say so?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't start with the logo piece, right? That's one of the fun aspects of rebranding and a brand analysis. It's really so much more than that. To our organization specifically, we wanted to add value and meaning to every single thing that we do. So, a brand to us is an intentional touches that add value to your messaging, your communications, your everyday actions, and it brings all your imaging, your words together as one. And it's so much more than pretty colors and a logo. So I would start there, but there's a lot of pre-work that goes into that brand before you get to the logo and picking out the colors.
That's right. That's right. So, what were some of the questions that you and your team asked yourselves when you were even considering, maybe a rebranding is right for our organization?
Absolutely. I think it was really important that to state that this was also happening during strategic planning for an organization. And for nonprofits, first, if you do not have a strategic plan, start there. Because it's going to go hand in hand and lead your decision making. So we had actually conducted a study that showed that if we didn't change in the next 5 years, we'd be shutting our doors. So in order to combat that, the first big question was, well, what would we do? What else could we add? What are the gaps in our community? And what would that look like? We jumped really far ahead to the question I think most people would ask themselves, and that was, if we changed our name, what would we be called? And then we backed up really quickly to do a lot of studying and some research, because really the questions that I would encourage, especially smaller nonprofits, to ask themselves would be, what is currently wrong or not working with our brand? What would it ideally look like if I had in endless resources? If I had endless resources, endless dollars, endless time, what would it look like? And in a perfect world, you would go to your staff and ask them what it looks like to them.
I love the collaboration there. There's this sense of kind of internal buy-in and internal work that has to happen. But one of the more important aspects is the community you're serving, right?
100%. There's so many stakeholders in the conversation that needs to be had, and it needs to be considered. And so when you're going through the process, you really need to evaluate every single one of those stakeholders and those audiences to collect that feedback to make the best decisions for your brand to move it forward. And that's going to guide you to the best outcomes that you can have.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of summarize what we mentioned earlier, the brand involves more than just the logo. It's your mission statement, it's your values, it's your taglines on your website, it's the style of your imagery, it's the color filter you add to your imagery. It's close-up shots in photography versus, a wider landscape shot. There's so many different ways that your brand communicates. And so what is the end goal really when you're trying when you're considering going under a rebranding process? From your experience and your marketing backgrounds and leadership, what are you really trying to do? What's the end goal?
The end goal for me, from someone who has done marketing and from my point of view, is consistency across all lines, across departments, no matter what you're looking at. So even if I'm looking at a flyer out in the community that's by this organization, my organization specifically, or if I'm looking at social media, if I'm looking at a headshot from the company, it all showcases the brand in its entirety, whether that's a simple glimpse of a color of a purple tie, which is our color, right? Or if it's a small glimpse of a version of the logo. We talked about logos a little bit earlier, but we have 45 variations of our logo.
Wow.
And that's to carry out our brand in its entirety. And so I would tell anyone that's looking for an end result, it's consistency. Consistency makes your brand, and it shows the community and all your audiences, including your staff, that you are dedicated to your brand and it has value.
And why is it important to have consistency?
I think about like when you're talking to, if you have children or your employees, that, if you say, tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth, but you're lying or fibbing or veering, it doesn't really hold any value, right? But if I practice what I preach, you see it every single day, you're going to mimic it, you're going to pick up on it, it's going to get stronger, and there's value there. And I think that is what is the most important thing. The other thing from my marketing brain, right, is that it becomes recognizable. You see the color purple. You're like, oh, Marisol Health, that's purple. Whether it's ours or not, you're just recognizing the color to the imagery that we've showed you over and over and over again with that consistency. If Nike done it best, right? The Nike check. Anywhere you see a check mark, you're like, Nike.
That's
And
right. Yeah, and I think we're kind of diving in a little deep on the marketing stuff, which is fantastic. But we're talking about recall and recognition. These are the two R's in the marketing world. So recall is thinking about the brand, right? And or the values, and recognition is seeing the brand, and recognizing it from that. So yeah, I love that we're tying in all of these like core pieces and how to connect with an audience and connect on a value level. like that's almost more important than the purple color, right? It's the values that you're exuding out for the brand. Um, so yeah, I would love to dive in a little bit different about, or a little more detailed here about your exact experience. And I would love if you could just kind of walk us through beginning to end. And how did this go for you? Where did you start?
Yeah, the starting point, is I would say it would be unique to us. And I was a new CEO, new in my position, and we've been talking about this word hospice that has negative connotations. We wanted to add new services, and I really pulled back and said the staff has been communicating for years that the word hospice is a barrier for them to deliver patient care. So much so that they would cover up the brand, the logo on their scrubs with a
Oh,
jacket because a patient family member would ask them to. We live in Hilton Head Island. When it is 85, 90 degrees on, you're putting a jacket over scrubs and going into probably a warm elderly home. It is not comfortable. Also, we wear name tags by state mandate. So when they're removing their name tag, they're violating not only our ethical standards, but state standards because of the name. So that barrier was huge in our starting process. So we started by really understanding why that word was a barrier and if we would replace that word, what would we replace it with? During that, we realized as a senior leadership team that we're very close to our brand and we're very biased on our brand and our name, and we really couldn't analyze it truthfully. So we immediately started looking at a third party help guide us through this to really have some difficult conversations about what was working and what's not working. And I highly recommend that based off whatever your budget might be, because the conversations that we had with that PR and communications piece of that consultant was huge in starting our journey and leading us off the right way. But to answer the question more generically, we started with our mission, vision, and values and
mm,
reviewing those, make sure those were solid because those are the foundation.
excellent. So even though an organization might approach it from, oh, this logo, it's not good, or, oh, this aspect of our program isn't really lining up with the name of our organization. They might come in it from that angle, but it always is kind of anchored really in the mission, vision, values.
100%. If you go back to the mission, vision, and values, and those are strong, you get to move to the next step, which is what I would consider exploring your audiences and getting the feedback. We naturally want to jump to colors and logos and imagery, but making sure that those three things are solid is super important because what we found is that we actually wound up tweaking our mission because it was so founded in end of life care that changing our name wouldn't have meant much if our mission still said hospice care within it.
Mm. Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. And this is fantastic because you have a strategic plan that you are working alongside and new program initiatives. And there was kind of this moment of opportunity where you're like, hey, this is a great time to reorient, to reposition our organization, public facing with the work that we're doing internally. Can you talk a little bit about how you got to that point of identifying, oh, this is an opportunity to reposition our organization?
Yeah, and, I previously stated that I was a new CEO, so there was automatically an opportunity of newness there, and I was promoted from within, and so I already had a lot of the organization history that I didn't have to learn. No one was waiting for me to learn the role. They were ready for me to step in, which I was super grateful for. So having done that study of feasibility of what our impact could or couldn't be, and that we were going to close in 5 years if we didn't change our size, really led the discussion of here's the opportunity we have to reposition ourselves in the community, reposition ourselves as a competitor because although we're a nonprofit in the hospice and palliative care space, we have 28 competitors in our market that are for profit. So then it was around taking the strategic plan where we wanted to go and figure out all the work we needed to do in the middle. And the most important part was how do we take the staff and guide them along this process? Because management can be really difficult, especially when you're changing the organization in its entirety.
Yeah. So could you pull back the curtain a little bit and share what some of those conversations were like?
Yeah, transparency is key. And so as soon as I realized that this change was coming, I started meeting with the staff to prep them. And it wasn't giving them all the information at once because that's really overwhelming, right? Because they have a very important job to do every single day and you don't want to offset that. So we would have small, what I called micro meetings or staff meetings where I would deliver them tidbits. Just being transparent with you, I want to let you know that we're exploring the mission, vision, and values. You guys are going to be brought in this conversation. You may get a survey. We're going to do some focus groups and just to assess where we are and what we're doing. And that naturally just escalated, and more people got bought in, and it really drove the conversation. So by like the sixth or seventh meeting, they were driving the conversation for this change, and it was really exciting to see. And so the name change kind of happened naturally after that, and there were no surprises for anyone.
Wow. Yeah. So I wonder, do you recall any insights that came from those initial staff conversations?
Yeah, I'll be pretty transparent. The first one was rough. Because
Great to
I was a new leader and I was talking about change and prepping them. And I think some people picked up on it fairly quickly that something big is coming. And some of the feedback was, I know the word hospice is hard to resonate with, but that's who we are. Why would we be anything different? And
Mm,
we've been here for 43 years. If you change our name, will that recognition or brand recognition or association go away? And so there were people rooted in that foundation. And I really had to make sure that my team and the consultant was paying attention to that foundation. And actually, those statements guided us along the way so that we made sure that we protected the foundation and the history of our organization throughout the entire process.
wow, absolutely profound. And it's incredible that you have such passionate staffers who, speak their mind and say it like it is, because I have no doubt that that was just a key insight throughout this whole process. And, this is the risk that organizations take on if they are considering a rebrand, right? It's alienating your core audience, which also includes your staffers. But your target audiences, right? And so you have to kind of walk a tightrope in a way where you don't want to alienate those who have the brand recognition and recall with your 40-year history of an organization. At the same time, you're trying to reduce barriers so more people can enter your mission and your programs, right? So
Yeah.
as you're walking down this path and you're taking these insights, what are some things that you did to kind of balance that as you went along?
Yeah, I think it's really one, such a great question. Thank you. And the answer is not an easy one, but one, listening to your staffers is key. You have to give them a space where they can be heard and you have to be willing to listen and then you have to be willing to take that information and figure out how to use it. It doesn't mean that they're going to get the outcome that they want, and it usually means you're not going to get the outcome that you're thinking. It's going to be something that comes together that's mutual beneficial for everyone, and it's probably going to be a greater outcome than either one of you could have imagined, right? And that's what happened for us. I think it's also important to point out that we had four generations of staffers. So
Wow.
yeah, so from anywhere, I think it was like 21 to 83 was our age range there. And so they all communicate differently. They all have different values. So we had to take all those things and make sure that we were collecting their thoughts and their viewpoints based off what they were delivering and how they wanted to deliver them. Walking the tightrope was delivering the information back to them in a way that they could understand it. in a mutual setting. So I had a lot of one-to-one meetings. I had a lot of group meetings. And again, it goes back to that transparency. There were some times where I would get questions that I would say, I just don't know the answer to that right now. We're not there just yet, but I promise you, when I know, you'll be the first to know. So I think that's something I learned through the brand analysis and this journey that has made me a better leader. I just say, I don't know right now, but let me figure that out for you. And it's not going too fast. This is not a fast process. If you need to slow down and think about a decision and have two or three more meetings to get to the solution or the sound decision that you feel comfortable with, that's okay. If you need to go back and ask your staff again, would you re-answer this question and think about it this way? That's okay. And I would encourage anyone that's going through this process to, if you're feeling overwhelmed or you feel like it's going too fast, it probably is. Take a step back, recheck, get in tune, and then move forward.
Right. And I would think like 12 months is the fast track for a rebranding or a brand refresh. What do you think the a good timeline is?
That's really hard depending on the organization. 2 years for us felt really fast.
Wow. Wow.
Um,
Okay.
And we'd done a lot of pre-work, but it was like once we had prepped so well that once you go public, you're like off to the races. It is out there and everyone wants to know about it. The pre-work before that felt kind of slow sometimes. If I could go back, I would probably spend more time in research just because I'm kind of geeky and nerdy like that. I want to know the nuances. But I think 2 years was good for us because the staff was itching to get results and we've been talking about it for so long. So it was tangible in that 2 years to achieve.
Got it. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about research and the brand analysis and what goes into that.
So much. And it goes back to our logo and our colors conversation. We really wanted to have value and meaning in everything. So some people see the color purple in our brand, but it's actually indigo purple because indigo was the first cash crop on Hilton Head Island when settlers settled here. So that goes back to foundation, to heritage, to culture. It has meaning. And when I was able to deliver that to the staff, it was like wow, that's really cool. And then when you look at the sunflower, that was one thing that the staff really resonated with. So every aspect of our brand has research, but it's also the communication and, our previous logo, Hospice Care, the logo, we had done focus groups and research on it that showed us the results where it was rigid and kind of hard and
Wow.
the text was too sharp and it needed to be rounded and more bubble. And that was just fascinating to me because sometimes we don't think that intuitive about what we're looking at. We just see the words that we've always seen. So when we were looking at our brand, we did these focus groups that asked very intentional questions about what they were looking at, what they were reading, what they felt, how they think they would feel if they saw it here. And we were able to wrap that into a research analysis that helped drive the brand overall.
Okay. And just to clarify, they were looking at the old brand, like the original brand when they were doing that work, right?
So they did the old brand, and then as we would get new pieces that we were considering for the new brand, we would do the same process.
Fascinating. And so these descriptor words, sharp, rigid, these are some of the opposite of what you and your mission are trying to accomplish as an organization, right? So those were considerations that you took forward into the new logo, and the new brand overall. Absolutely fascinating. I'm wondering if you can share a little information. How did you set up these focus groups? Who's in these focus groups? Like, how does a nonprofit professional just set up a focus group and get some feedback about their brand?
Yeah, I know initially you're like, oh, we just get a group of people together. Definitely not that.
Right.
Yeah, and we did use a consulting firm, which we were very blessed with, but they we knew our audiences more than the consulting firm. So
Yes.
And we had a few stakeholders that we knew we needed to touch. So, as a hospice and palliative care organization, we needed to touch our referral sources. So, we
Mhm.
reached out to referral sources, new referral sources that have been with us for 25 years. We invited them to this focus group, signed confidentiality clauses, obviously, is very important. And then they got directions about what this was going to be about. We're looking at a new brand. We want you to look at some stuff. And we're just going to talk about it and do open feedback. So we did referral sources, we did staffers, we did volunteers, we did donors, and then we did community members. So all five of those were focus groups that really helped us. And we put the same information in front of all these focus groups and then brought that feedback in. The scheduling is obviously the hardest part, but it worked really, really well. And that feedback that we got from those focus groups really excelled the direction that we were going in.
Okay, so it's worth the scheduling nightmare. It's worth going through, all these connections and different kind of subgroups of people who are connected to your organization. And, what could you remember some of the insights that came out of this group of people?
Yes. So you get the good, the bad, and the ugly in the focus groups,
Yes, love
which is
it.
perfect because that's what you're asking for, right?
Right.
And I remember vividly of a volunteer that had been with us for 21 years saying that, and we had taken care of her husband. And she said, the word hospice deterred me from picking up the phone. And so in this,
Whoa.
and I know, boom, right? You're like this woman had been with us volunteering for 21 years. She was educated on our mission, our vision, our values. She knew everything about hospice, but the word hospice was a deterrent. And she said, I waited, and I can't say that if the word wasn't there that I would have reacted sooner, but I can say it would have made me feel a little bit better.
Wow.
I
Wow.
know. So just small, that was profound. And then from a referral source who had been with us for 25 years, he really kind of transparently stated that we had a strong brand in some parts of our market, but in other parts it wasn't that strong. So by rebranding and renaming, it would give us a new way to open a door to have more partners for what we were doing.
Unbelievable. So this is a great story, and thank you for just laying out all the details of this, because this is really what a brand analysis is. And this is how you can really align your organization's visual and just all the tools you're using to communicate with the work that you're actually doing, and open so many doors on so many fronts and build deeper relationships. It's really about building those relationships, right? Um, so yeah, so I'm fascinating. Let's talk about audience a little bit more. What other audiences did you involve in this process that you maybe haven't mentioned yet?
So patients and families are super important as well
Okay.
because we are caring for patients while we're going through this change. And so getting their feedback was super important. What we found is that it wasn't as important to them as really understanding that the quality of care was not going to change and their supportive services wasn't going to change. And so that was really profound for me because I thought they would have more insight. The community and donors, they had a lot to say. I think it's because they're investing and they've seen the brand, so they were really protective. And so it's important to know that you are going to have audience segments that are really going to push back on any type of change, and that doesn't mean you don't change or you don't rebrand. It just helps drive where you're headed. So we had people that did not agree with the name change. They didn't think it was a good idea. And so I had to take our research and our focus groups, put that into a presentation, and I did almost 100 small sessions throughout the community with people to walk them through this decision making.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So, Okay, so let's go through. Okay, so let's say you did all of your brand analysis, you have all your focus group information. You're starting to find these like golden nuggets, these insights. Your employees were covering up the name on their scrubs. You're hearing from the mouths of people that, the word hospice is triggering and makes them want to disconnect with your organization rather than lean into the resources that you have available. So how do you make the leap from all of this information to starting to make decisions about the brand?
Yeah, and so we knew that we were going to be adding other services. And we'd already identified what those services were and the community impact and the gaps. So we started associating what we had researched and what we had gathered to where we were going in the future and what was coming. We know in our area that over the next 5 years, we are going to have a huge increase in seniors in our area,
Okay.
but not necessarily more healthcare services. So we started making it about change management and that our brand needed to change with that. We also, being a health regulated organization, the regulatory market is really volatile in healthcare, especially hospice. So we were able to relate it to the healthcare regulations and how we needed to have streamlined processes also with our brand for that. To answer the question overall, we started making the change in the decisions. That information alone in the research phase and all we gathered back was all we needed to say. We need to change our name. We need to change
Mm,
the brand. We need to update it. Let's start. We took
great.
our core values and we were like, this is still our foundation. We made our next pivotal decision was that hospice care of the Low Country throughout those focus groups couldn't go away. And so we had to make it that decision that we made. We were like, how do we keep hospice care of the Low Country, but create a new brand or an elevated brand? And that's where we came with elevated brand. So we decided that we would create a new name, but hospice care of the Low Country would be the program name for hospice care forever.
Awesome. This is so great. And so, this often happens as organizations change their name, they have like a subtitle or like a sub brand that was a part of their history that they carry with them. They don't want to make too far of a leap. And that's again walking that tightrope and connecting with all your audiences. So what a great choice. And do you feel like it panned out in the end, making that choice?
You know, as soon as I delivered that to the staff first, I saw a sigh of relief that it was a win that we protected our foundation and our heritage. And that was in itself the trajectory that we needed. Every other decision thereafter was like, yes, this is great. Yes, this is great. Thank you so much because we have protected essentially our foundation and our family. And I got to lead with that statement in every single one of those 100 presentations I started with. I just want to let you know right now today, hospice care in the Low Country is never going away. That's not
Mm.
happening today. We're talking about an elevated brand that's going to take us into the next 43 years.
Hmm. I love it. I love it. And even if it's not necessarily like listed as a part of the logo in certain elements, like on a newsletter or whatever, it's still a part of your brand, even if it isn't listed every single place. So that's
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. Okay, so getting buy-in, let's kind of pivot to that. Was there anything else in addition to these kind of presentations that you did to get buy-in with stakeholders?
Yeah, so not only did we do focus groups, we did the presentations, we sent out surveys, we offered feedback and then more surveys and more conversations. It was really back and forth, and then summarizing and presenting. Um, I think what was most important during this process is that people who were participating could see where their process was being utilized in the strategy. We would literally take their statements and their quotes and put them on slides associated to something with a brand. And it wasn't always positive. Hospice care is rigid and sharp, where
Mm,
and then there was the old burgundy color was dull and uninviting to even The field staff wear black scrubs, which means doom and gloom to me. So those things people got to see, and then we would do their positive statements too. And we did a side-by-side analysis and delivered that. And the buy-in just kept coming and coming and coming. And when I look back at it now, because it's easier to look back, I can really see how even some of the naysayers started to buy into this new brand and really start to jump on board and be positive about it.
Yeah, it's fascinating because the programs, while you were evolving your programs and different ways that your patients and families could have more resources, um, the literally the color of the scrubs changing can change their perception and their experience at your facility.
Yeah, it is. And going back to that buy-in, those small changes, purple brought happiness and glee. And, they'll say the purple team's here and, they associate that to us now, which is great. But the buy-in also was the impact that we are going to be able to provide through adding more services. And I think that's where your audiences really resonate is this brand identity and brand change is going to allow us to impact 50% more people. We're going to add two more counties. And here's the gap that we are serving. And we're preparing for this influx of seniors who are going to need services. When you lay that out and it associates to your mission, vision, and values, it's a no-brainer for most people.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about the gap in two ways, in serving an underserved audience who needs your services, but also on the competitor front. You did mention there's a lot of for-profit competitors that you had to keep in mind as you were kind of navigating this journey. Could you provide a little insight about that?
Yeah, so we noticed in our data that we were having to turn away a lot of patients, which is really hard because they were not qualifying for hospice when we were just hospice, but they were still really sick, chronically ill, and they needed supportive services. So there was this gap. And there is this new wave of palliative care, which is chronic symptom management and chronic illness management. So we started exploring that space. What aligned is that we noticed that most of our competitors didn't have a true palliative care program. So this gap was also this huge opportunity to influence the market and essentially control it. And so when we started evaluating this, and my marketing side was like geeking out during this whole process, right? Was that we could serve this need in our community with it tying back to our mission, but also have the growth that we need to sustain us for the future. And what we did was we took all these models of palliative care and created a community-based palliative care program that focuses on providing care in the home so patients don't have to travel to get their care. And that connected all the dots for us.
Wow. Absolutely fascinating. So, what did you end up landing on for your brand? Like, what were those big changes that happened that you still have today?
So I can still remember the day that the name kind of came out of the air. And I'm not being like facetious. It's just we were like, what are we gonna call ourselves? And we were waiting for this like inspirational moment. And we had the sunflower imagery, we had radiance and abundance and compassion, like all these words hanging around. And a person in the back said, let's start looking at other languages. Maybe we're putting ourselves in a box. And I can remember our then HR director said, there's this like rare and radiant sunflower that starts with like Mira, Mira. She's like, let's just play with that a little bit. And then someone in the nursing field said, sunflowers always make face the sun, and soul, SOL, means sun. And then it was like, oh, bringing them together. And we were like, so what? Mirasol, 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 and we were like, Mirasol. This is it. And literally we all just sat for a moment and was like, I think this is it. I think this,
Wow.
let's hand this to the consultant and see what they can make it look like. And I will never forget that. And I'll never forget the day that we decided on indigo purple because of the cash crop. And I'll never forget the sunflower and the rounding of it. And when I got to see all that come together in an image, the logo was a no-brainer because it just all fit like a puzzle. And when we unveiled that logo for the organization, there was not a dry eye in a seat.
And why do you think that was? It wasn't really about the curve they did on InDesign to make that perfect thing, but what was it? Why were people so moved by this?
My personal opinion is that when we revealed that logo, they saw the value in what they do every day represented in that brand, and they saw what they had put into the brand. They had felt heard, they felt seen, and they felt respected, and that this brand would carry us forward. It was all of their ideas that came together to make that. They saw the sunflower, they saw the purple, and then once we got to explain the name, and they saw the sub branding because we knew that that needed to be represented. Everything was there that they needed.
Incredible. And it represented so much more than your history, but it represented the future too, right? You basically inspired your staff to go to work tomorrow and 5 years from now and 20 years from now. So yeah, I want to know what outcomes you've seen. So the brand has been public now for a year or how long?
No, no, no. It's only been public for about 6 months.
Oh my, okay.
Yeah.
So this is all new still. So congratulations, first of all. It's absolutely beautiful. Love your website too. Um, do you how okay, what indicators or what are you measuring to kind of evaluate success or yeah, t talk to me about that. Talk to me about outcomes.
Yeah, so I think there's a few different ways to look at this, and we could definitely dive into the marketing side, which I'm gonna kind of stay away from because that's like a no-brainer. You track your traffic on your website, your social media interactions, all of that. What's more tangible to me is one, hearing it reciprocated back to me the way that we've delivered it, not only from staff, but from the community members. As a nonprofit too, it's a blessing every day when I go into the development office and they're showing me all these Marisol checks. Like people are writing Marisol because we were like, we're gonna have this huge hiccup. We went to the bank and was like, okay, we need to make sure we can accept checks that say hospice care of the low country, right? But what's even been even more inspiring is just our staff is in purple almost every single day, not because they have to, because they love it. And we just went to a state conference and we were there. There was no dress code, and we all walked out. I'm like, oh my gosh, we all match. Like we should have like gotten together, and people are gonna think we did this, but we didn't because people are so just ingrained with our brand that they're loving it. But also because our donor capacity has increased by 20%. Our patients have increased by over 100%. So we went from serving 40 patients per day to 220 patients per day.
Wow.
And that alone tells me that the community is seeing what we're doing. They understand that this change was necessary and that they are buying into it because they're selecting us for their care every single day.
What a beautiful story. And, thank you so much, James, for just breaking down everything that went into a rebranding project. I have a question that I think could provide some insight to other organizations who might be looking at their logo and being like, huh, or looking at their values and being like, that's not really where we're at these days, or considering doing a new program that doesn't line up with their organizational name anymore. If you could do this all again, if you could do this all again, how would you approach it differently? Or what's something to keep in mind?
Definitely keep in mind that it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of effort. And the most important thing for us is that we needed to provide the space for people to speak honestly and truthfully about the brand. If you don't provide that space, you're not going to get the communication that you need to make the decisions that you need to make. I also think it's important that you just heard me talk about a complete rebrand. You do not have to do it that way. You can do small tidbits of pieces to refresh your brand to get to where you need to be. So really make it what you need it to be. If you need to tweak your logo first, that's fine. You can do that. So I think we sometimes we see we looked at these large organizations that were going through like $300,000 brand studies. And our board was immediately like, there is no way we can afford this. And I'm like, no, we need to make it fit us, who we are, what we can do. So kind of going back, take your time, make sure you plan for it. Two, make sure you have a space where people can openly communicate. And if that's getting a consultant, then it's getting a consultant. But if that's someone on your team that's a great facilitator, that works too. And then three, pick off the projects that you know you can achieve that will have the most impact for you for your brand analysis and brand study.
Absolutely wonderful. James, it's been an absolute honor, two marketing nerds going at this. Thank you so much for your time and sharing Mirasol Health's story. If you want to learn more about Mirasol Health, we'll have that in the show description. And we'll also have some other resources about the details of like branding and some components and some keywords that we talked about today, such as recall and recognition, if you want to learn more about that. So thanks, James. It's been an honor. I hope to connect in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I'll talk marketing and branding anytime.
Sounds great. Bye.
Yeah.